Hi, I'm very happy to be here at React Alicante to talk about Storybook and how basically I'm using it to design, develop documents, and debug all my React components. But first, I want to introduce myself a bit. I'm Mary, I'm French, I come from Paris, and I'm currently a developer at Algolia. For those who don't know Algolia, we are a search as a service provider. This is annoying. Basically, if you ever use React documentation, the search of the React documentation, React Native, or the Yarn search packages, it's us behind the hood. And basically, I'm leading a project which is called React Instant Search and help developers build such search interface. And I'm using Storybook all day long, and I want to share my workflow with it. As you may know, UI components often relies on several states. Those states come from their internal states, or also from their props. And basically, if you take this simple component, which is a pagination one, it's basically something I will deal with every day. It's simple, right? But if you pay close attention to it, it has a lot of props. You have the props that concern pages, so the number of pages, the current pages selected, the page padding, and then you also have props that will deal with UI, expressly like button, if you want to display some button, like the show first button or the show last button, stuff like that. And basically, depending on the combination of those props, you will expect a different behavior. So if you are at the first page, you will probably want to disable the show first button and the show previous button. And same thing, if you are at the last page, you will probably want to disable the show last and the show next button. What does that mean is, depending on those combinations, you will have a different design. And if you are inside the middle of your complex application, sometimes it can be hard to get to that right state. So that was the first issue. But then, you develop your components, you're happy with them, and then 6 months later, do you remember the props, what it was supposed to do? And worse, new developers coming into your project, they need a way to understand how the component is supposed to work, what the props are supposed to do, without digging super hard into the production code and stuff like that. Basically, they want to have access at something that could help them ramp up quickly on your project. So here's Storybook. So I will say probably React-Storybook, ton of time. It has been rebranded to Storybook now. Basically, what it is, it's a tool that provides you an isolated environment. And the goal is for you to quickly develop and design your components because you still enjoy the hot reloading. The project was launched beginning of 2016 by people of the THURET team. So here you have the main contributor at the time. It's funny because I redid this slide a lot of time, and the first time I did it, it was 8K stars, and now it's 14K, so it was a lot of massive adoption, which is fun. And let me tell you a bit of story about Storybook, because beginning of this year, at some point, the THURET team shut down, and basically Arunoda, which was the main contributor of the project, switched to another one, which is Next.js, so it didn't have time to handle the maintenance of Storybook. And a lot of people were asking, okay, is the project dead? And it was kind of dead at the time, in March. And so Arunoda said, okay, I will open it to the community. Let's find some contributors and maintainers that want to take the project over. And a lot of people get into it, and it's crazy. And now it's not just about maintaining Storybook, it's about getting Storybook in other field and do other stuff. This is a screenshot of the PR that were made during August and September, during 1 month. You can see, there's a lot of authors that contribute to the project. And I want to take the opportunity of this talk to thank Norbert, which is basically the coordinator of everyone. It's he's doing an amazing job coordinating everyone. It's super difficult to do, and it works, so that's great. Here is typical development lifecycle, probably your developer journey. And what I want to show you in this talk is that Storybook will impact not only the development and the design of your components, but it will help you document them and debug them, and most importantly, discuss about them with other people. To get started with Storybook, it's super easy. You just have to install this command line tool, get Storybook, and run it. If you want to migrate from Storybook v2 to v3, it's incorporated some code modes to help the migration to be a bit smoother. And basically what you get is this interface. So it's divided into 3 parts. On the left, you have this menu with the list of your stories. You have something that is called stories kind, which is basically more or less your components, and then the list of the story, which are like substates of your component. At the bottom, you have this little space with all the add-ons, because one thing that is great with Storybook is that you have a lot of add-ons you can use depending on your needs. And then the most important part, where the components are rendered. So I talked a bit too much, so let's show you a small demo. So when you want to add a story to Storybook, the first thing you need to do is to create a stories kind. So here it's pagination. And then you can start adding your stories. So here I added my pagination with the state of the first page selected. So now if I want to modify, let's say, some color because I'm not a fan of the blue anymore and I want some red, I can do that. And okay, I need to restart, good. So let's do it again, just to show you that I'm not kidding with this. So some red. So you have the zero loading, you get the concept, it's pretty easy. It works the same way with JS code. If you want to remove something, like let's say a button, the first button, I remove it, you see it disappears, right? You get it how you can quickly develop with a lot of iteration your UI components. So that's one thing, but obviously it's not the more important thing. You can go better and do some other good stuff with Storybook. The first thing actually you can do is expliciting the behavior of your components. So if you look at this pagination one, you see that it takes a prop, which is called onClick, and right now the function is undefined. What I can do here is using the add-on actions and say, okay, this is an action, and it's the action onClick. And now, if I'm using, if a user or yourself, you are clicking on the components, you can see that the action will be logged. So here, I'm clicking on the page 2, I can see the action has been called, and you can see the payload of the function. So here, it's a page number. That's first thing that is nice, expliciting behaviors. But once again, we can go further than this. The other things we can do is expliciting props. The goal is for your user, co-workers, whatever, to have an interface where they can play with the props and see the effects on the components. So to do that, I'm using the knobs add-on, and I will take the current page as an example. So this is basically a number, which is the current page, and I will say that I want the default value to be 1. And now if I'm going to the knobs panel, I can see the props here, and I can just change it. And 13 is not in the boundary, so 3, you can see it's re-rendering the components as you go. So actually that's super interesting, especially with props that can be hard to get just with the documentation. Here you have just the example, it's super helpful. Another thing that Storybook can help you with is some generated documentation. So for that, I will add a new story. Yeah. So you can see that it will appear on the left. And this one is using like a new function that comes from the add-on info. And what you can do is pass a description to that function, and then it will render some stuff automatically for you. So as you can see here, you get the description I just wrote. You have also the usage of your components and the props that are combined. You can inline the documentation. You can use it as a small, like with a button or whatever. It comes with a lot of options. So now we have two stories, and maybe those stories are related to each other, and maybe you want to explicit the connection between them. So actually you can link your stories with another add-on, which is the add-on links. And here, for instance, on my first story, instead of saying that onClick is an action, I will say when I click on my pagination, I want to be redirected to the other story. So to do that, you just have to use the link to function. You say, I want to go to the pagination last page selected story. And now if I'm clicking somewhere, I'm redirected. So this is a pretty naive way to do it, because obviously if I'm clicking on the page 5, I don't want to arrive on the last page selected. So the second parameter can actually take a function, and you can redirect things a bit more like in an interesting way. Finally, if you are a big user of React-Storybook, at some point you will have a lot of components, probably. So they introduced something about having you like hierarchy. So here, for instance, what I can do is, instead of having the stories kind pagination, I can say, okay, it's not just pagination, it's widgets pagination. And so if I'm writing this like that, it will create a hierarchy, and you can have like a deeper hierarchy if you want, which can help if you want to organize your stories. So if we take a step back and look at what we are doing when we wrote our stories, when we are like writing the declaration of our UI components, what we are doing is that we are thinking API first. And that's actually a great thing, because oftentimes we want to provide generics and reusable components. And once again, if we do that, if we try to do that in the middle of an application that is complex, sometimes it's not easy to do. Here, with Storybook, you are in an isolated environment, so basically you are forced to think in a way that will help you achieve this genericity and reusability with your components. And if we take a step back more, what we just created here, it's a live documentation. So why a live documentation? Because basically it's code that is executed. So in comparison of documentation that is static and that contains like code samples that are like static and that will break eventually, probably sooner than like, you know what I mean. Storybook is a great documentation from the outside, because anyone that goes into that website, they can discover the style and the behavior of your UI components, but it's also a great documentation from the inside. Because once you spotted a component that you like to use, you just have to read the stories declaration, and you can see how you can use it. You will see the props that you need to pass. It's super helpful. And basically what is great is that Storybooks not helps you, but allows you to build a static version of it, so you can publish it somewhere on the internet, internally, whatever, but you will have a URL you can share with your coworkers or the world, or depending on your use case. So here, I want to show you some example of that. The first one is from Airbnb. So basically, if you are interested of using a date picker, you can end up on this website, which is the date picker of Airbnb. And as you can see here, they have a section called Live Playground, which redirects to their storybook. So you arrive on this, and here it's a calendar, so you can just click somewhere, you will see how it looks like, what it does. They are even using the add-on info plugin, stuff like that. You can see all the variation their components allows, and you have quickly a good idea if these components will suit your needs or not. So that's really helpful instead of, I mean, some project can do that on their own. Here you have the storybook, it's great. At Algolia, it's part of our documentation. So basically, if I'm taking the documentation of the pagination again, we have like a button that redirects you to our storybook. And this one is a bit special because I wanted our users to look at our components in the context of search, because we are a search API, so our widget has impact on the search, and the search impacts the widget. So that's why I created this whole frame. So basically, if you are using the component, you realize what it does on the search, and same thing, if you are typing something, you will realize what it does on the components. This demonstrates that you can pretty much adapt the storybooks to your own use case if you need to. And I also created this stories a bit specific, stories, which is called Playground, that basically expose all the props of our components and lets our users play with them. So for instance, page paddings can be a bit tricky to get. So here you can just play with the props and see the effect on it. It's way easier to have an example, like I said before. Sometimes it will help you understand faster. So we developed, designed, and we also documented all of our components. That's cool. But like I said, it's a live documentation and it's based on code. And code can break, right? So how do we make sure that this documentation never breaks? Well, it's like production code. You need to road test. We know that we should test our UI components. And for those who actually do that, you probably end up with a lot of files, with a lot of component declaration, and you do some assertion on it. You probably even use snapshot testing. And now you have like the storybook with other component declaration, probably the same declaration. So you have duplication. And duplication may not be the best thing. So actually, Storybook lets you test your components in several ways that are complementary and not like exclusive. So the first things you can actually do is snapshot all your stories with the add-on that is called StoryShot. So the principle is to store all the markup of your stories, and then when you are developing in the middle of a development, it will say that if the story breaks or not. That's super cool because it comes for free. Basically, you already wrote your components, you add this add-on, boom, you have snapshotted all your stories. That's cool, but to me it was not enough because I think that snapshot testing is great to create a layer of anti-regression, but it's a bit harder to express actions and stuff that are not static. So basically, last year when I discovered Storybook, I had this idea of testing my story and stuff, and I created a specific add-ons because when a developer is writing a test, the first thing actually it's trying to do is expressing an intent. And if you take this very carefully, what you end up creating is the whole specification of your application. It means that if you read your test code, you should be able to understand all the business logic and like everything that applies specific to your project just by reading those tests. Because if you do that with production code, oftentimes it's like a lot of abstractions and it can be hard to get. With tests, you have actually a way to be way explicit. So, like I said, I created an add-on which is called the specs add-on, and that allows just that, to be able to write specification of your stories just next to them to explicit their behavior. The last thing you can actually do with storybooks in order to test it is performing some visual regression testing, which is a bit like the snapshot one. But instead of snapshotting markup, you are actually snapshotting the visual of your components, and you are performing some diff. It's a very trendy topics at the moment. You have like a lot of actors that get into the wagon. So here are some. Some are paying solutions, some are free for open source, some are completely free. Basically, us at Algolia, we are using Argos, and what it provides us is this new line on our CI, and when it fails, it gave this little interface with the before-after and the comparison in between. And you can approve or reject the change depending of the PR. So, small demo again. To start with snapshot testing, it's super easy. The only thing you need to do is creating a test file, any test file, and add those 2 lines of configuration. And now I just have to run my regular test command line. So here I have 2 stories, so it created 2 snapshots, right? And if I'm like removing this button again, you can see the test failing, and you can see why it failed, and you can act in consequence. Now, if you want to go further than this and use this specs add-on, what you can do is text 1 stories. So I will take the last page selected, and here I can like write a test. So the test does not matter really. Here I'm using enzyme and expect, and basically it works with everything that runs into a browser. It tests if when we click on the show first button, actually we are going to the first page. And what it gets me is this little like specs written. So clicking on the show first button should select the first page, right? And now if I'm modifying the value and I say, no, it's not the first page, it's a 10 page now, it will fail, and you will see why. Obviously, the plugin is made to work on the browser, but also it explains how you can plug it with the CI, because both modes are to be working. And at some point, I will do a V2. I'm saying that like a lot of times, that will handle jest. But yeah, it would be great if some people can help on that, if you're interested. Finally, the last thing I want to show you is Loki, which is a completely free software for visual regression testing, but you will have to do the CI integration yourself. So when you want to start with visual regression, what you need to do is say, okay, right now I'm on the good state, so just like update your snapshots. So it will do exactly that, creating some picture as a reference. So you can see. And now, once again, if I am modifying something, and now I can like test again, saying, no, you can test. And it will fail. It will say where, and you can see the current version and the difference between them. So yeah, it's easy. Sometimes visual regression testing can be a bit flaky because depending on your use case, some pixel can change. For instance, Hus, because the widgets are connected to the search API, sometimes the results are not exactly the same, so you can have flakiness tests, but it can help spot like unwanted regression also. So now we have everything, but will come the time when we want to maintain our components, which is not maybe the funniest part. And indeed, with Storybook, you created like a lot of entry points when you can just go and start to add like new features. Once again, with the API first state of mind. And if you have like some bugs you want to debug, you can use this isolated environment like at the force. Even though the stories that you have are not enough to demonstrate the bug, you can just use it, create another stories, like combining components, whatever, to just like demonstrate it and fix it. So that's a pretty good thing. But in my opinion, the best part of Storybook is about when you want to communicate with others. Often, issues with projects are not related to code by itself. It's like it's code, it can break, it can fail, but at some point it's fixable. Oftentimes, like projects that fail, they are failing because of wrong communication between developers, between team of developers, between developers and business, whatever. It's always a matter of communications. And we are using Storybook extensively in that purpose. Here are some examples, like real-life example. So basically, here it's me that submitted a pull request. And on React Instance Search, we have this tooling that basically deploy every time someone creates a PR, it deploys a documentation website and the storybooks on Netlify. And what it allows me to do is like I can pinpoint the story I just like did some modification to, and my coworkers can see it like super quickly and say, okay, the change, they're okay or not. Instead of having to check out the branch locally, run everything locally. Here it's like super instant. And it's also helpful for your users. For instance, here, it's one user that spotted a bug. He opened an issue on GitHub. He describes everything, and at some point, he pinpoints the stories. He guides us through a certain like path, and we are able to see the bug like super quickly. It avoids like some back and forth that oftentimes happen. And finally, it's also helpful for your contributors. So here is someone that also spotted a bug, so that no stories were there to demonstrate it, so he created the story, he fixed the bug, and then he pushed the pull request. So for us, once again, it's a way to quickly understand what the user wanted and what he did and stuff like that. So super helpful. Those are workflows that work for us, but obviously you can imagine your own. So let's say you want to work closer with your designer. So one thing you can do is share this website, this storybook, to quickly check if the components are correct or not. So here it's a little recap of everything I just said. So as you can see, the develop part is really handy because of the auto-loading, because of the isolated environments. What you just did with React-Storybook is you created a style guide, basically. And this style guide is live. You can test it, you can expose props, and it's also a perfect like entry point to start adding new features, debug stuff, and most importantly, it's a great material to share with others in order to start discussion. But why adopting Storybook? Because there's other tools that exist right now. And I remember me on a project like maybe 3 years ago, a number project. We basically did that manually. We had the page with our components inside and we tested it. So it's completely doable like by hand. So why using Storybook? So first reason would be that now there are like a lot of work that is done to make it universal. So what I mean by universal Storybook is that you can use Storybook for React, you can use Storybook for React Native, you can also use it for Vue, and soon you can probably use it with Angular. Anyway, like they build it in a way that if a new framework comes along, it can be integrated. So before telling you the second reason, I wanted to show you quickly the React Native version. It's like live since the beginning, I think, but lately they added what did you yeah. They added the fact that you can see the storybook on the device itself, so that's really powerful. So my initial wish with this demo is what if you are using like Expo already, you can run it, but because everyone is on a different Wi-Fi network, it will probably not work, so it's okay. We just go through the simulator. Here, once again, it's very naive because I just replaced the whole native application by the storybook. In real life, you can choose how you can display the storybook in a native environment. So here, our storybook, pretty much the same kind of interface that on the web. And now, if I'm like modifying my app, you will see the exact same performance that for the web. So it's very helpful, especially for mobile, because sometimes you can mess with like styles and stuff. So being able to develop like UI components in the storybooks avoid like some issue you can encounter otherwise. So I told you that there were like a second reason of why you should use Storybook, and this reason is the add-on API. So pretty much at the same time they launched Storybook, they launched also what they call the add-on API, and basically it gives you some tools to create your own add-on. So if you can find what you want in the add-on that already exists, you can build it, and you can share it with the community, because I can assure you that if you need something, probably other people will need it too. So here you have a way to do that. You have like a lot of add-on already existing, some of that are directly in the repo of Storybooks, others that are on GitHub. Here is some example. As you can see, some are focused on documentation, some are more focused on design. Basically, you have like a lot of options. So I encourage you to check out this if you're interested. And to finish, here is a roadmap of the project. So there is no date here, but it's what people are working on or thinking about with Storybook. One feature that actually I'm interested in is what they call the playground add-on, which would be a way for you to modify the code of the story directly from the storybook to let user play with the code. I think that would be a great enhancement. And yeah, you have like everything here. So thank you. And well, if you have any questions.
Hi, so thank you for the talk. Awesome, I really enjoyed it. One question is about the documentation part that you touch. I can imagine it's like sometime, for example, your pagination component, you release a breaking change. And do you have a strategy of how the documentation support the evolving and breaking change? Because I can imagine people maybe still rely on some old components. How can you check the
Yeah, so we don't. I had this question before. It's about versioning, like the documentation. basically you will have two versions by yourself. So let's say you are on V2 and you want to keep the V2 somewhere. You publish the storybook with the V2 path, and you keep like the most updated at the roots, something like that. We don't do that because, well, right now because we don't have like that many breaking change on the UI parts. So we don't. We didn't need to, but if you want to, it's the thing you should probably.
Hi. Please, can you repeat the name of the tool that you are using for visual regression testing? If it's possible, open the npm page only for
yeah. Oh, shit. It's called Argos CI. It's like not known at all, I guess. Yeah, and basically I think right now the one that is maybe the most known is Percy, but I don't know the policy about pricing and stuff like that. Yes, I think that was another question.
You showed before the React Native storybook, but I didn't see any action logger or add-on API. Is there any plan in the roadmap to integrate them, or are them already there? Because tools like action logger is really nice to have also on React Native environment.
Actually, I don't know. Yeah, I can check, but I know that for some add-on it's not easy because of compatibility issues. So it's per add-on case. I think it's per case. But it's definitely right. It's great thing to have.
So we've been using Storybook for quite some time, and I'm a big fan. And our strategy was to put every component to Storybook, but at some point we got a lot of stories and it became a little bit hard to maintain. So what is your strategy? Do you put every component, do you make stories for every component, or you just put some style guide reusable components into Storybook?
So I don't have this issue of having too many components that it's like getting cluttered. Did you try the hierarchy strategy? Because it was released like maybe 2 months ago, something like that. So it can help to create stuff. Otherwise, maybe like try to like have not that many combinations. Try to like regroup like stuff. Maybe it can work. Like the most important one, the one that wants to highlight it, because they are important in terms of compression and stuff like that. Would be one other ways of dealing with this kind of issues.